So as Bernie Sanders has now solidified his status as the frontrunner, he's won 3 primaries back-to-back and won the popular vote, most notably, something that is groundbreaking, that is historical. No other candidate has ever done that before. And as he's done that, the mainstream media have been melting down. The mainstream media are realizing that these attacks aren't really having much of an effect and bouncing off of Bernie Sanders like rubber bullets. They have turned to their toolbox and fetched their faithful old tool of Russiagate and the Soviet communist smears. What they've done essentially is try to dig up old remarks that Bernie Sanders made in the 1980s where he was praising some aspects of Fidel Castro's regime, notably when it comes to effectuating social change and social programs. So I'm just going to show you very quickly a clip from CBS for context so you can hear Bernie Sanders saying it himself and what they are saying too.
Senator Bernie Sanders heads into the South Carolina primary as the clear frontrunner, but today he is facing backlash after comments he made about communist leader Fidel Castro.
You know, when Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing? Even though Fidel Castro did it?
There's a lot of dissidents imprisoned in Cuba.
That's right, and we condemn that. Unlike Donald Trump, let's be clear, I do not think that Kim Jong-un is a good friend. I don't trade love letters with a murdering dictator. Vladimir Putin, not a great friend of mine. I have been extremely consistent and critical of all authoritarian regimes all over the world, including Cuba.
Senator Bernie Sanders defended his praise for Fidel Castro.
And he formed the Literacy Brigade. You may read that. He went out and they helped people learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing.
The Castro literacy program did teach hundreds of thousands of people to read and write in the 1960s, but it was also used to spread communist propaganda. Sanders' opponents also sharply criticized him.
Why are we spotlighting the literacy programs of a brutal dictator instead of being unambiguous in our condemnation about the way he has treated his own people?
So what they're trying to do essentially here is take Bernie Sanders and be like, you see, he's praising murdering dictators and he's praising communist regimes. No, he was very clearly just saying that some things that were implemented, some of the social programs, like this literacy brigade, these are some good aspects about Fidel Castro's regime. And they're trying to spin it as that Bernie Sanders praised everything that Fidel Castro did. Now, I just want to make something very clear. This has nothing to do with Fidel Castro. All of this whole circus right here, forget Fidel Castro. The entire point of this is to shoot down Bernie Sanders. That's the point. It's not about Fidel Castro. They don't care. They've tried everything with Bernie. They've tried the Bernie bro myth. Oh, your supporters are violent. Your supporters are bad. They've tried the socialist angle. Oh, you're a socialist. You're just going to take away everyone's jobs. They've tried the you can't win against Trump argument. Oh, you can't beat Donald Trump. No one's going to vote for you. They've tried everything. And so now they're running out of things. So they got to turn to the ye old faithful communist smears. They got to really go hard. I mean, this is really reaching. This is like yoga stretch level reaches, okay? Now, I just want to show you a clip from NBC, and God, it's just so awful. I mean, I can't decide who's worse. Like, MSNBC, you have Chuck Todd, you have Chris Matthews, Morning Joe. I mean, where does it end? It's just, each one is worse than the other. This is going to be really bad. And the dislike ratio on their videos is hilarious. It really shows you that they're so out of touch with the electorate. So I have some historical commentary to make. I want to talk about international politics because this is completely related. I want to leave my best remarks for after this clip. So let's just watch it and then we'll discuss.
They went out and they helped people learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing.
Okay. What?
I don't even know what to say, Willie. I don't know what to say
Why?
because he said he has this with every dictatorial regime. He finds something he likes. Like
Who does that remind you?
He had a literacy regime. I mean, but he also had a regime who tortured Catholics, tortured people who worshipped God in a way he didn't like, tortured students that had newspapers, kept people locked up for years, killed people. I mean, and then when Bernie talks about the Soviet Union. They had wonderful chandeliers. Did you see they had wonderful chandeliers in their subways? Like, this is not an argument. Same thing with the Sandinistas. Going down to Nicaragua, talking about the great progress they're making instead of talking about the torturing, instead of talking about... Has there been a communist regime that Bernie Sanders visited that he didn't find something appealing about? You cannot talk about chandeliers in a subway when you're talking about a regime that killed 30, 40 million of its own people, either through forced famines or through torture or through show trials. You cannot talk about Fidel Castro's literacy programs. You just can't. Not in American politics, and you shouldn't be able to, without talking about the long laundry list of evils committed by Fidel Castro against his own people over decades.
The way that Joe is so concerned about torture. Oh my God, wait till he hears about the CIA's torture program. Oh boy, wait till he hears about that. The CIA wrote the modern handbook on torture, okay? The CIA has the most expansive torture program in history, dating back to 1945 until now. The CIA would go around South America and Latin America teaching right-wing paramilitary groups how to torture people. The most grotesque, obscene methods you can't even imagine. And this is not just one regime. This is every single administration from 1945 until now. They've been doing this all over the world. You want to talk about how many people the CIA has killed, how many they've killed with their wars? All these death squads in Nicaragua, the Contras, or the death squads they funded in Indonesia in the 1950s? Or do you want to talk about the death squads they're funding right now in Afghanistan? There's estimates of 20 to 30 million people killed just by the CIA's covert actions. Not to mention all the people killed in the regime change wars in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, in Somalia, etc., etc. It's so much. I mean, you could pile up the Empire State Building with reports about death squads and executions and war crimes that the CIA has done all over the world, that they're doing in my country right now. And you have the gall to come along and vilify other countries for torture. Look at your own country. Every administration, every regime in your country does that. The hypocrisy is unreal. Watching an American news anchor vilify other countries for torture when his own country does that on a regular basis, daily, is so unreal. This is ridiculous. And what the fuck does it have to do with Bernie Sanders? Jesus Christ. If you know about the Cold War, if you know about what the United States has carried out, these covert black ops that they've carried out in Latin America to effectuate regime change, to do coup d'etats, if the stuff that they've done in the Middle East, the stuff that they've done in Africa, the things they've done in Southeast Asia, all in the name of containing communism, I mean, it's unbelievable. And then they have the gall. They got the stones to come and vilify other regimes. I mean, this is hilarious. The entire model of American foreign policy is torture, is coup d'etats, is going into another country, undermining other democracies. I mean, the CIA is in my country right fucking now doing that. It's so funny to watch that as a third person perspective. It really is. And another hypocrisy that I want to point out is they talk about, oh, Fidel Castro, he imprisoned all these political dissidents. The United States does exactly the same thing. Look at Chelsea Manning. Twice. Even after Barack Obama commuted her sentence, back in prison now because she refuses to testify against Julian Assange, who again, they're trying to go after too because he's a dissident. He's never even been to the United States. Look at the reach, how desperately they're trying to go after him. Well, he's never even been there and he's in another country, in another continent. Look at Edward Snowden. Look at Max Blumenthal from the Grayzone. They slapped him with a false assault charge, threw him in jail for a week, and then magically released him. They intimidate journalists on a regular basis. They will imprison you if you go against the establishment in the United States. So don't be fooled by this Western imperialist thinking that, oh, only in communist and socialist countries, in those repressive regimes, are political dissidents imprisoned. No, they do that too in the United States. They do that too in the West. All the time. They're just better at sugarcoating it for you, so it's easier to swallow. So it goes over people's heads. But they do the exact same thing. Just ask Max Blumenthal, just ask Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, all of them. Okay, and many, many more. They constantly misuse the Espionage Act of 1917 to prosecute journalists. The Obama administration prosecuted more journalists with the Espionage Act than all previous administrations combined. So there is a war against journalists and political dissidents in the United States and in the West. Make no mistake, don't be fooled by this Western imperialist narrative, this brainwashing that only in brown countries are political dissidents and opponents mistreated. No, they do this in the West too. Make no mistake. And anyway, you also have, like the pundit said, a stark contrast with the voter demographic in terms of age groups. You can see that younger voters swarm towards Bernie Sanders.
Here, though, I think when we have talked for the last year or so about Bernie Sanders and his poll numbers, the one thing we keep saying is there is a profound age divide. When you're talking about folks who are under 45 years old and particularly under 30 years old, we saw this in Nevada. He got 66% in Nevada under 30 years old. When you go to the other end of the age spectrum, folks who remember Daniel Ortega, the Sandinistas, those battles of the 1980s, who remember the Democrats in the 1970s, folks like George McGovern, the charge that they weren't, they were a little soft perhaps on communism. That was the charge that was out there in American politics. That was a very difficult position for Democrats like McGovern to be in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Folks who remember that and see that in Bernie Sanders, what you're just showing now, those are the folks who have not been warming up to him consistently in the polls. People who don't have much firsthand memory of the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s, Bernie Sanders is doing very well on.
Like we saw in Nevada, right? 2/3 of younger voters, 17 to 29, voted for Bernie Sanders. They don't care about this fear word or trigger word of socialism. They don't give a crap. Okay? They haven't been brainwashed. They haven't been conditioned for X number of decades during the Cold War by that. They weren't there. They weren't alive. And so, of course, you have a divide there. This is, like I said, you need to deprogram people because not only is it unhealthy to be locked into that point of view about the world, but also it's not the case with Bernie Sanders. He is not a communist. There is someone on Twitter, by the way, who said we should get a real communist to run in the presidential race, just for reference, just so you can see the clear difference between Bernie and an actual communist, just so it's more apparent to people. That's actually hilarious. So you really need to undertake an effort of deprogramming people, right? Destigmatizing that word for older voters. But what he's saying here, Joe, about, oh, Bernie Sanders has never met a communist regime he didn't like. Yeah, you never met a war you didn't like. I mean, look who's talking, man. I really think it's funny how Pete Buttigieg is sticking his nose in it. He's making comments during his own town hall and then also going on Twitter and posting the clip on his own Twitter of Bernie Sanders talking about Fidel Castro. Like, yeah, he just talked about the literacy programs. That's it. He's just an opportunist, Pete Buttigieg. He's looking for any excuse, just like the mainstream media, by the way, to jump on Bernie Sanders to try and tear him down and make him look bad. But it doesn't work. You can't sway Bernie voters. As we've seen in poll after poll, Bernie Sanders supporters are the most loyal. They have their minds already made up. You're not going to make them switch to anyone else. So that's a silly undertaking. And also, as Bernie Sanders is the front runner now, he has effectively gained as much momentum as you can. I mean, they're really grasping at straws here, truly. Remember, this is not about Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro is irrelevant. As Joe just showed you, straight from the horse's mouth, he's talking about Bernie Sanders has never met a communist regime he didn't like or something like that. It's just about smearing him. It's just about smearing him. It's not about this specific example of Fidel Castro. It's never about that. It's all about making Bernie Sanders look bad. This is manufacturing consent. That's all it is. It's a brainwashing diet. Okay? MSNBC, they're coming with the spoon. the anti-Bernie spoon. That's it. They're just coming here to feed you. Here comes a choo-choo. That's it. Make no mistake. And you know what's so funny? I've seen many people say this now. You have more honest and neutral, fair coverage towards Bernie Sanders from Fox News than you do on MSNBC. How messed up is that? That's just something else, man. But really, this is just hilarious watching Joe get so worked up about torture programs and killing squads. I mean, just look at your own history, man. It's going on right now. Right now, the United States is funding jihadists in Syria that have ethnically cleansed Christians and other Muslims and Kurds. I mean, wake up. This is hypocrisy. How dare you open your mouth? Anyway, what they're going to do for sure tonight at the South Carolina debates, they're going to bring this up. They're going to bring this up. I told you this many times before. When Bernie Sanders had a heart attack, I told you they're going to bring it up at the debate. And they did it. And they're going to do that again tonight. They're going to do the same thing now. You can bet the moderator is going to bring it up, and then Pete Buttigieg is going to chime in and he's going to say, well, I don't think we should have someone praising brutal dictators. Shut up, you rat. You're such an opportunist. You know, the guy is literally CIA too. He goes into other countries illegally, operates there illegally, trying to undermine other people's governments, and then has the nerve to talk about that. I mean, that's just ridiculous, man. That's really hilarious. So anyway, at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders is trying to implement free college. What the hell does that even have to do with Fidel Castro? He's trying to implement Medicare for all. I mean, speaking of Medicare for all, you guys all know that in Cuba, they have a vaccine against lung cancer, for example, that the U.S. couldn't access because of the embargo, right? They have made big advances. They have made big advances in literacy, as Bernie Sanders says, in medicine. These are the things they don't want you to know. This is the brainwashing in the West that every single country that is brown or communist or socialist is bad. This binary system, like, oh, it's socialist, bad. No, there are legitimately good programs, objectively good programs, social programs that have been implemented by socialist and communist countries for their own people. And by telling you that they're completely bad, they try to brainwash you with this worldview that only America is good, only the West, the white man is good, and everybody else is bad. No, this is horse crap. And by the way, this is also a way to keep your own people oppressed and in line by hiding from them the good things that exist elsewhere. They don't want you to know that other countries have universal healthcare, because then you're going to want universal healthcare, right? Go read 1984. I mean, it's all laid out right there, and they're doing it in real life, and it's really messed up. So at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders, he's trying to implement social programs like Medicare for all, like free college. He's trying to raise the minimum wage. These are things that benefit the populace, that benefit the American people. And they're trying very hard to bring him down because his agenda goes against what corporations want. And they're using this as an excuse to do that. They will try every trick in the book, as I've told you many times, and this is their latest one. And by the way, another thing that the Grayzone reported on, which is very interesting, they're also trying to claim now that Vladimir Putin, that Russia, is actually aiding the Bernie Sanders campaign. And it's just so ridiculous. I mean, make your minds up. Make your minds up. Is Vladimir Putin helping Trump, or is he helping Bernie? Which one is it? It's so ridiculous. I mean, they're really grasping at straws and reaching to come to these conclusions. Also, why would you need Vladimir Putin to help Bernie Sanders? The guy is already winning. He's winning by himself. And again, as Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mattei said, what is so bad about another country wanting Bernie Sanders to win? Bernie Sanders is good. Bernie Sanders wants diplomacy. He doesn't want war. I mean, where is the nefarious plot that you're looking for? Again, they're trying to do this whole narrative, oh, he's a Manchurian candidate. Man, it's so hilarious and exhausting at the same time. Like, they just can't stop. They just can't do it. So two things, man. They're trying to bring up old comments about Fidel Castro to paint Bernie Sanders as a communist sympathizer. The whole McCarthyist routine, basically, right? Oh, you're a communist sympathizer. And at the same time, the Russiagate stuff. Oh, he's being aided by Russia. The Russians are helping Bernie Sanders. You see why it's so dangerous to be a fanatic about Russiagate? Because now they're using it against other Democrats. It doesn't stop at Trump. It's not just, oh, the Russians might have aided Trump. I mean, sure, it's possible. Why not? The Russians meddle in other people's elections just like America meddles in other people's elections. These are very powerful nations. They have interests. Sure, it's not beyond the imagination. However, the problem is when you start believing in it 120%, at anything they say, they're going to use it like the McCarthyism stuff. Anyone they don't like is suddenly being aided by Russia. No, this is nonsense. Don't fall into this trap, because then it's a tool that they can use to suppress political actions and the people. Can't fall into that. So anyway, they're really digging deep and reaching now to go after Bernie Sanders, right? This is what they found in their toolbox for now. Comments about Fidel Castro and Russia allegedly aiding Bernie Sanders. Absolute nonsense. They will do everything they can to stop him. And like I said, they're going to bring it up at the debates tonight. It'll be interesting to see Bernie Sanders' response and what the other candidates are going to do. You can bet Pete Buttigieg is going to jump on him. And it's not going to work. I mean, in my opinion, it's not going to work. This might create some buzz for a few days, but then it's over, right? People just don't care. You can't stop the movement that Bernie Sanders has created. No one cares that he's a socialist, or you could call him a communist if you want to. No one cares. We know what the policies are, and that's what we're interested in. Thank you very much.